big concerns about some of the PPP loans. And if we're able to directly maybe get that information to you about this specific instance, that would be very helpful to them. And I do appreciate your time. Can I get that commitment, sir?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, sir. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. And as I do, I also want to thank the committee for what has been a pretty productive subcommittee meeting. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. Distinguished gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Green. Georgia, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And gentlemen, I thank you for coming before the committee today and discussing this very, very important issue, especially given that our government has the American people in over $31 trillion in debt. So we appreciate you helping track that down and where it goes. Since all the money has been spent on COVID, there's approximately over $400 billion missing, which is extremely concerning to most Americans. And I just want to talk for a brief second about how difficult it's been. Obviously, everyone knows this. The government shutting down our economy, shutting down businesses, paying people basically to stay home, the difficulties of it for employers to get their employees to come back to work, to start going again. And, you know, here we have the GAO estimates that the total fraud and pandemic UI programs amounts to at least $60 billion. Just a brief question for you, Mr. Turner. Were there any states that seemed to be particularly vulnerable to fraud and improper payments in their UI programs?
We saw across the country, most states exhibit the same problems and challenges. Didn't really see, so all of them I felt were vulnerable, and there was vulnerability that was displayed.
What type of problems were there?
Again, the multi-state claims with stolen identities was the #1 problem, just multi-claims and people filing for numerous people to include deceased individuals, prisoners, suspicious email, multi-states.
And has that been chasing down those basically criminals? Has that been something that your department has been putting a lot of time to?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, from day one, and we've only just been able to scratch the surface. So that has been the biggest challenge for us.
Approximately how many charges have you filed, or how many people have you filed charges against?
1,200 indictments and 600 charges. And just kind of let me give you an example of the scope of what we've been dealing with. You know, before COVID, before the pandemic took place, we had maybe 100 cases or complaints a year on UI fraud. Since then, we've been getting 100 to 300 a week.
Wow, that's a considerable amount. Thank you for answering my question. I'd like to ask about the do not pay system. I know you all been asked about this a good bit before. The Office of Management and Budget and the Treasury Department jointly maintain the do not pay system, which is a free service that agencies can use to verify a recipient's eligibility for payment. I'd just like to ask Mr. Del Mar, Mr. Turner had said previously that some states don't use the do not pay system. Is that correct? And if so, why not?
I believe they are now required to, but that wasn't always the case. So I think the combination of they've made improvements in their interface. It's an easier system to use than it was, and the addition of the additional databases that we talked about, the Death Master File and a couple of others. And one point I was going to make is the current legislation allows a 3-year use of the Death Master File for DNP. So that would go from the end of this year through the end of 26, roughly. I think there's a proposal to make that a permanent allowance, and I think that would do a lot to make the system more effective in stopping multiple payments or ineligible payments.
Right. There seemed to be plenty of them, I think. Did all agencies involved in pandemic relief use the do not pay system?
I don't think all did. I can get you more specific information and address your question, with a lot more depth, and we'll do follow-up on that.
Great, thank you so much. The Pandemic Response Accountability Committee found 69,323 questionable Social Security numbers allegedly used to obtain $5.4 billion in COVID relief, according to a report. Mr. Shoemaker, do you know what happened to that money, and was it ever recovered?
The specific instance, no, I don't know if that money was recovered. It would have been, it could possibly be associated with ongoing cases or cases in the past. That was a different type of a project. That was a data analytics project, just to review. But what that report indicates, it was a very powerful resource, which is the Social Security Administration. That data is not readily available to the Office of Inspector General. It's not readily available to programs whenever they stand it up. So when we talk about the instances where an agency may not have used do not pay, the government has data available. If that data is made available, which we're in the business of best evidence. If you're an auditor or you're an investigator and you're looking for the best evidence, you go to the source. If that source data is available in the programs and in oversight, we certainly can unlock the power of that data.
Right. Well, that makes sense. In October 2020, your office said that SBA's management continues to insist that its controls are robust despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Do you still agree with that assessment?
Certainly that assessment at that time, and I believe that assessment has been proven true. The over 700 indictments and 600 arrests is further proof that there is rampant fraud in the EIDL program.
Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back her time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Mafumi, the ranking member, for having us hearing. This is the old part of my old subcommittee, so I look forward to working with you as we progress. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I must say I'm impressed with the data you presented us in terms of indictments, prosecutions, convictions, and recovery. I think it is important to remember the context. Congress, in the worst pandemic in 100 years, in which people, by the way, did not allegedly die, they died. Almost 1.5 million Americans are dead. Mr. Garcia didn't mention it, but I believe his mother and stepfather succumbed to COVID when he was the mayor of Long Beach. All of us have stories of loved ones and friends and associates who died from COVID because protocols weren't in place, vaccines weren't yet ready. We didn't know how to manage this unknown thing.